Adesla couldn't believe what was happening. One moment she was arguing with Beo about something small, and the next, she heard the click of the lock as he shut the door on her face. It was past midnight. The air was cold, the street empty, and her heart pounded so loud she could almost hear it echo. She knocked softly at first, thinking maybe he was just angry and would open again. But when no answer came, her knocks turned desperate. "Beo, please open the door," she whispered, her voice breaking. But inside the lights went off. That was when she knew it wasn't a mistake. He had really locked her out. She stood there in her thin nightdress, clutching her small handbag, feeling a mix of fear and shame. The city that always looked alive now felt cruel and silent. A few passing strangers glanced at her but kept walking, pretending not to see. Her phone battery was dead. Her heart even more so. She leaned against the cold door, trying to make sense of what just happened. How could someone she loved, someone she planned to marry, treat her like this? In that lonely hour, Adesla realized that the man she trusted most had just become her biggest stranger. Adesla wrapped her arms around herself and started walking aimlessly down the street. The night felt endless. The streetlights flickered, and the sound of distant dogs barking made her heart beat faster. Every passing car made her flinch, afraid someone might stop and ask why she was out at that hour. She wanted to disappear, but her trembling feet kept moving. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay standing in front of that door anymore. Her phone was dead, and her wallet was still inside the apartment. All she had was her handbag with a few personal items. The more she walked, the more she felt her courage slipping away. The air was getting colder, and her thin dress did little to keep her warm. A part of her wanted to cry, to scream, to collapse on the pavement and let it all out, but she refused. She didn't want anyone to see her broken like that. She lifted her chin, wiped her eyes, and kept walking, hoping to find somewhere, anywhere safe. She thought of calling her mother, but even if she could, what would she say? That the man who promised to love her forever just threw her out like trash? The thought alone made her chest tighten. Her legs ached, her throat was dry, and her heart felt heavy with humiliation. She looked up at the tall buildings of Zamira City, so full of life during the day but now dark and cold. For the first time she felt how lonely a city could be. She sat on a small bench near the roadside, hugging her knees. Fear crept into her bones. What if something happened to her out here? What if Beo never came back for her? But then amid the silence, a light came on from a nearby window, and a soft voice called out, "Are you all right, my dear?" It was a woman's voice, calm, warm, and full of concern. Adesla turned toward it, her heart thudding with a strange mix of fear and hope. Adesla looked up and saw a woman standing at the gate of the next building, her robe tied neatly around her waist and a gentle concern on her face. It was Nkem, her neighbor. Adesla had seen her a few times in the hallway, always polite, always graceful, but they had never spoken much. Tonight, Nkem's voice felt like a lifeline. "Come inside, my dear," she said softly, waving her over. For a moment, Adesla hesitated. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want anyone to know what had just happened. But the kindness in Nkem's eyes broke through her hesitation. She nodded slowly and walked toward her. As soon as she stepped into Nkem's apartment, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The smell of lavender candles filled the room. It was clean, peaceful, and full of soft light, so different from the chaos in her heart. Nkem handed her a warm shawl and guided her to the couch. "You're shivering," she said gently, pouring her a cup of tea. The simple gesture made tears fill Adesla's eyes. No one had ever been this kind to her without asking for something in return. At first she couldn't speak. Her lips trembled every time she tried to explain. Nkem didn't rush her. She just sat close, listening quietly, her calm presence soothing the storm inside Adesla. Finally the words came out, broken, shaky, painful. She told her everything, the fight, the shouting, the locked door. Nkem didn't interrupt. She only nodded and placed her hand on Adesla's, saying, "You didn't deserve that, my dear. No one does." Something inside Adesla cracked open. The tears she had held back all night finally fell, and Nkem pulled her into a gentle embrace. "You're safe now," she whispered. And for the first time that night, Adesla believed it. The world outside was still dark and cruel, but inside that small apartment, kindness had become her shelter. As Adesla sat in Nkem's cozy living room, she felt her body slowly relax for the first time that night. The warmth of the apartment melted away the chill that had clung to her skin for hours. Nkem's home smelled of fresh herbs and vanilla candles, and soft music played quietly in the background. It felt like a safe world far away from the pain she had just come from. Nkem placed a steaming cup of tea in her trembling hands and said gently, "Drink this, my dear. It'll help you calm down." Adesela nodded, whispering a soft thank you. The first sip burned slightly, but the warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. She sat there in silence for a while, trying to hold herself together. Nkem didn't push her to talk. She just sat nearby, watching with a kind smile. "You don't have to say anything tonight," she said softly. "You've been through enough. Just rest." Those words felt like medicine. No one had ever spoken to her with so much understanding. As time passed, Adesela began to open up little by little. She told Nkem how everything had started so beautifully with Beo, how he used to bring her flowers, call her his queen, and promise her forever. Then slowly everything changed. His words became colder, his eyes sharper, his love conditional. Nkem listened quietly, her face calm but her eyes full of sympathy. "People who try to control you," she said, "are the ones most afraid of your strength." Adesela blinked, surprised by the wisdom in those words. For the first time, someone wasn't blaming her or telling her to be patient or forgive him. Nkem's words didn't make her feel small. They made her feel seen. When Nkem showed her the guest room and told her she could sleep there for the night, Adesela felt tears roll down her cheeks again. But this time they weren't from fear. They were from relief. For the first time in a long while she felt safe, warm, and strangely hopeful that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't ending that night. It was only beginning. While Adesela was finally resting in Nkem's warm home, Beo sat with his friends at a fancy lounge across the city, laughing loudly and pretending everything was fine. He bragged about how he had taught Adesela a lesson for talking back to him. His friends chuckled awkwardly, not knowing how to respond, but Beo enjoyed the attention. He leaned back, sipping his drink, acting like a man proud of his actions. "Women these days need to know their place," he said arrogantly, shaking his head. "Sometimes, you just have to remind them who's in control." He spoke with so much pride, as if locking someone out in the middle of the night made him powerful. Deep inside, Beo believed Adesela would come crawling back by morning, apologizing, begging, and promising to behave. That's how it had always been before. He thought he owned her heart and her fear. He had no idea that the same night he threw her out, fate had already started turning against him. One of his friends, Kunnel, glanced at him uneasily. "You sure that was wise, bro? The world doesn't smile kindly on stories like that anymore," he warned. But Beo waved him off, laughing. "She'll be back before sunrise," he said confidently. Where else would she go? He had no clue that the answer to that question would soon destroy the image he had built for himself. Because the woman who opened her door to Adesela that night, Nkem, was not just a random neighbor. She was Madame Nkemi Hanacho, the CEO of Lumina Enterprises, the biggest company Beo's firm was desperate to keep as a client. At that very moment, while Beo laughed at his own cruelty, Nkem sat beside Adesela, comforting her with warmth and patience. Destiny was quietly rearranging the pieces of their lives. The man who thought he was teaching a lesson was about to learn one himself, the hard way. But he didn't know it yet. In his pride and blindness, he laughed a little louder, never realizing that every careless word he spoke that night would soon come back to. The next morning, Adesela woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and soft sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment, she didn't even remember where she was. Then everything came rushing back. The argument, the locked door, the cold street. Her heart sank again, but when she stepped out of the guest room, Nkem greeted her with a warm smile that immediately eased her pain. "Good morning, my dear," she said kindly. "Today we start again." Nkem's calm voice carried a quiet strength that made Adesela believe her. She handed her a clean dress from her wardrobe, simple but elegant, and said, "Put this on. You can't face the world in yesterday's pain." Adesela hesitated at first. Her reflection in the mirror still showed a tired, broken woman, but Nkem stood beside her and said softly, "You are stronger than you think." Those words hit deep. For the first time, Adesela looked at herself and didn't just see someone who was abandoned. She saw someone who had survived. After breakfast, Nkem took her to a small salon nearby. "A little self-care isn't vanity," she said with a wink. It's healing. As the hairdresser washed and styled her hair, Adesela watched herself in the mirror, noticing the change in her eyes. The sadness was still there, but it was no longer all she saw. There was something new, something quietly powerful, rising beneath it. They spent the rest of the day talking, laughing a little, and sharing stories about life. Nkem told her how she had once gone through betrayal herself, how pain can break you, but also shape you. Adesela listened, feeling something heavy lift off her shoulders. That night, when she looked in the mirror again, she smiled faintly. Her eyes still carried sorrow, but her posture was different. Her chin was higher. Her heart felt lighter. For the first time since that horrible night, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was finding her way back to herself. And this time, she wouldn't let anyone take her worth away again. Over the next few days, Adesela began to see life differently. Every small act of kindness from Nkem felt like a light shining into the dark corners of her heart. Nkem never treated her like a helpless victim. Instead, she spoke to her with respect, as if she were an equal, someone capable of rebuilding her life. That simple difference began to change everything inside Adesela. In Beo's world, love had always come with conditions. He gave attention when she obeyed, affection when she stayed quiet. But in Nkem's world, kindness came freely, without judgment or pride. Nkem never asked for anything in return. She just listened, advised gently, and reminded Adesela that strength wasn't about shouting or fighting. It was about knowing your worth and walking with quiet confidence. Every morning, Nkem would say something small but powerful. "When life breaks you," she told her one day, "it's not the end. It's an invitation to rebuild stronger." Those words stayed in Adesela's mind like a prayer. She started helping Nkem with small chores around the house, feeling useful again. She even began writing in a small journal Nkem gave her, pouring out her pain, her lessons, and her dreams. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset over Zamira City, Nkem said, "People like Beo mistake control for power. But true power, my dear, is in giving, not taking." Adesela turned to look at her, and for the first time she truly understood. Beo had made her feel small so he could feel big. Nkem made her feel seen so she could grow. That night, Adesela lay in bed thinking about how different both worlds were. The one ruled by fear and the one built on kindness. She realized Nkem hadn't just given her shelter. She had given her back her voice. The quiet strength in Nkem's way of living taught her that kindness wasn't weakness. It was power in its purest form. And that silent power was now waking up inside her. Adesela knew she had every right to confront Beo, to shout, to demand an apology, but she didn't. After days of thinking, crying, and reflecting, she realized something powerful. She didn't need his apology to heal. He had taken her peace once. She wouldn't give him the chance to take it again. So instead of fighting with him, she decided to focus on herself, quietly, steadily, and with grace. Every morning, she woke up early, made her bed neatly, and followed a small routine Nkem helped her create. She started learning new skills online, applying for small jobs, and helping Nkem organize her home office. Each little task reminded her that she was capable, that she still had purpose. At night, she wrote in her journal about her growth, not her pain. Slowly, the memories of Beo stopped feeling like open wounds. They became lessons. Sometimes, when her phone buzzed with messages from him, she just stared at it, then turned it off. The old Adesela would have replied instantly, desperate to fix things. But the new Adesela had learned that silence can be stronger than any angry words. She didn't need to prove her worth to anyone, especially not to the man who failed to see it. Nkem watched her transformation with pride. "There's power in peace," she told her one evening. "When you stop reacting, you start controlling your story." Those words stuck in Adesela's mind. Instead of plotting revenge, she focused on rising higher, letting time reveal her strength. Every day, her confidence grew a little more. Her laughter returned, soft but real. She started walking taller, dressing beautifully again, not for anyone else, but for herself. She didn't know it yet, but the world was about to see her in a way it never had before. And when Beo finally did, he wouldn't see the woman he once controlled. He would see the woman he could never break. One sunny afternoon, while they were having lunch together, Nkem received a phone call. Her tone changed slightly, calm but firm, as she discussed business figures, deadlines, and meetings. Adesela listened quietly, impressed by how confident and respected Nkem sounded. When she ended the call, Adesla smiled shyly. "You sound so powerful, Ma," she said. Nkem laughed softly. "My dear, power is just responsibility handled with grace." As they continued eating, Nkem began sharing a little about her work life. "I run a company called Lumina Enterprises," she said casually, stirring her tea. "We partner with different firms across the city." Adesla froze for a second. That name sounded familiar. Lumina Enterprises, where had she heard it before? Then suddenly it hit her. Beo. He had once mentioned that his biggest client was Lumina. Her heart skipped a beat. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes wide. "You mean Lumina Enterprises that works with Beo's firm?" Nkem looked up slightly amused. "Ah yes. Beo Adekunle, right? I've seen his name on a few contracts." "Why?" Adesola's breath caught in her throat. It felt as if destiny had been quietly weaving this thread all along. The same man who threw her out was now depending on the woman who gave her shelter. For a moment, Adesla didn't know what to say. Her emotions tangled between shock, relief, and disbelief. Nkem noticed her expression and smiled knowingly. "Life is funny, isn't it?" she said softly. "It always brings things full circle." Adesla nodded slowly, her mind racing. She realized that she now held something powerful. Not revenge, but the opportunity to see justice unfold naturally. Still, she stayed quiet. She didn't want to act out of anger. Instead, she decided she would wait, watch, and let life speak for her. That evening, as the sun dipped over Zamira City, Adesla sat by the window, thinking about how everything had changed since that night. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would. When Nkem told Adesla about an upcoming business meeting at Lumina's headquarters, she suggested Adesla come along to help with presentations and note-taking. At first, Adesla hesitated. "Will Beo be there?" she asked quietly. Nkem nodded, her eyes calm and steady. "Yes, and that's exactly why you should come," she said gently. "You don't have to speak. Just let your presence remind him that you rose, not broke." The morning of the meeting, Adesla dressed carefully. She wore a simple but elegant Ankara dress that highlighted her natural beauty. Her hair was neatly styled and her face glowed, not from makeup but from quiet confidence. As she looked in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "I'm not the same woman anymore." When they arrived at the conference hall, the room was filled with important business people. Adesla followed Nkem inside, carrying a folder and keeping her head high. And there he was, Beo. He looked up mid-conversation and froze, his eyes widened, disbelief flashing across his face. Adesla didn't look away. She simply gave a small, polite nod and sat beside Nkem, her expression calm. Throughout the meeting, she didn't say a word out of turn. She listened, took notes, and handled her tasks with quiet grace. Every time she spoke to Nkem, her tone was confident and professional. Beo kept glancing her way, clearly unsettled. It was as if seeing her there, composed, respected, and glowing, was the greatest punishment of all. After the presentation, Nkem introduced her to a few partners, praising her for her dedication and intelligence. Adesla smiled, thanking them politely, while Beo stood in the corner, watching helplessly. When their eyes met one last time, Adesla didn't frown or smile. She simply gave a calm look that said everything words couldn't. "You can't hurt me anymore." As she walked out of that meeting room beside Nkem, the air around her felt lighter. For the first time, she wasn't walking away in pain, she was walking away in. Beo sat frozen in his chair long after the meeting ended, pretending to check his phone while his mind raced wildly. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Adesla, his Adesla, was standing confidently beside Madame Nkem, the woman whose signature could either build or destroy his business. He felt his chest tighten as the truth sank in. The same woman he had humiliated and thrown out like nothing had been rescued by his most powerful client. It felt like a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. He replayed the night in his head. The shouting, the slammed door, her pleading voice asking him to open. Now all he could think about was how stupid and cruel he had been. If only he had known who she would end up with. He tried to smile and greet Nkem after the meeting, but his voice cracked. "Ah, Madame Nkem, I didn't know you and Adesla were close." Nkem turned to him slowly, her calm gaze cutting deeper than anger ever could. "Yes," she said with a small smile. "She's been staying with me. She's a remarkable young woman, strong, intelligent, and full of potential." Her tone was polite, but Beo heard the message hidden beneath the words. His palms began to sweat. He tried to explain himself, stammering excuses about a misunderstanding and emotions getting high, but Nkem didn't entertain it. "We all make choices, Mr. Beo," she said firmly, "and every choice has a cost." With that, she turned away, walking beside Adesela as if he didn't exist. Beo watched them leave, feeling smaller with every step they took. His arrogance had finally cornered him. For years he had built his reputation on charm and control, but now his power was slipping through his fingers. The very woman he had mocked was standing beside the one person who could decide his future. That night he couldn't sleep. His phone buzzed with messages from his boss. Rumors were already spreading about Lumina's CEO taking a special interest in his ex-fiancée. Panic filled his veins. For the first. Over the next few weeks, Adesela began to shine in ways even she didn't expect. Nkem, seeing her dedication and quiet intelligence, started involving her more in meetings and projects. She taught her how to write proposals, manage clients, and speak with confidence. Adesela soaked up every lesson like a sponge. Soon she was handling small business presentations on her own, her voice calm, her words clear, her presence commanding respect. One morning, Lumina Enterprises hosted a partnership event, and several companies were invited, including Beo's firm. Adesela was scheduled to present a proposal she had worked on for weeks. The thought of standing before Beo again made her heart race, but this time it wasn't fear, it was power. When she walked into the conference room, dressed in a fitted African print suit and golden earrings that glimmered under the lights, the room fell silent. She carried herself with elegance and quiet authority, just like Nkem had taught her. When she began speaking, everyone listened. Her ideas were fresh, her confidence magnetic. Even the senior executives nodded in approval. At the far end of the table, Beo tried to interrupt once or twice, making little remarks meant to undermine her. But each time she answered calmly, her voice firm but polite, never losing her composure. His words bounced off her like raindrops on glass. By the end of the meeting, Nkem smiled proudly and announced that Adesela would be leading a new joint initiative between Lumina and a local women's enterprise group. The room erupted in applause. Adesela stood there, smiling gracefully while Beo's face turned pale. He had never imagined she would one day stand in a room where she didn't need him, where she outshone him completely. As the meeting ended, Beo walked past her and whispered, "You've changed." Adesela looked him straight in the eye and replied softly, "No, I just remembered who I was." Then she walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless. Within days, Adesela's story began spreading quietly through Zamira City like wildfire. It started with whispers in business circles, how the young woman once humiliated by her fiancé had turned up at a major conference beside Madame Nkem, now confident, respected, and successful. Soon it reached social media. Someone had taken photos from the event, Adesela standing tall beside the powerful CEO, while Beo looked lost in the background. The pictures went viral within hours. People couldn't stop talking. Some called it poetic justice, others called it divine timing. "That's the woman Beo locked out," one person posted online. "And look at her now, grace in human form." Messages of admiration flooded in from women across the city, praising her calm strength. Many said she had become an example of how dignity speaks louder than revenge. Even men in business circles began warning each other quietly, "Be careful how you treat people. You never know who's watching." In markets, offices, and cafes, people discussed her story like a modern legend. They spoke of Nkem too, the neighbor whose kindness changed another woman's destiny. Together, the two women became symbols of hope and wisdom. Nkem's name was mentioned with deep respect, and Adesela's name carried inspiration. Meanwhile, Beo could hardly walk through town without hearing the whispers. His arrogance had turned into shame. He saw his name trending online not for success but for cruelty. His friends avoided him, his clients doubted him, and his pride shattered quietly. But Adesela didn't care about any of that. She didn't post anything, didn't gloat, didn't respond to gossip. She simply kept working, growing, and smiling. Her silence spoke louder than any interview could. In a city where scandals came and went, her story stayed. People began to say, "Never mock a person in pain. You might be watching the rise of someone you'll one day admire." And just like that, Adesela's quiet strength became Zamira City's Lu. Adesola's life slowly began to bloom like a flower after a long storm. With Nkem's mentorship, she started a small fashion and skincare brand called Sola Glow, inspired by her own journey from pain to confidence. Nkem guided her through every step: how to manage money, build trust with clients, and believe in her own ideas. Adesola worked tirelessly, designing every product with love and care, often staying up late in the same little apartment where Nkem had first welcomed her that cold night. At first, sales were slow, but Nkem reminded her, "Good things grow quietly before they shine." Adesola held on to those words and refused to give up. Soon, women across Zamira City started noticing her brand. They loved her story, her honesty, and how she encouraged others to embrace their natural beauty. Her social media pages filled with heartfelt comments from women saying, "You made me believe in myself again." For the first time in her life, Adesola felt proud, not because of how she looked, but because of what she was building with her own hands. She no longer cared about what Beo thought or what people once said about her. She had learned to stop seeking approval from those who never valued her. Her focus was on growth, gratitude, and giving back. She hired 2 young girls from her neighborhood who had also gone through heartbreak and rejection. She told them gently, "Pain is not the end. It's a beginning if you use it well." Evenings at Nkem's home became filled with laughter, stories, and tea. They often sat by the balcony, watching the city lights sparkle, talking about dreams and future plans. Adesola had found not just a mentor but family. She was no longer the woman who cried outside a locked door. She was now a woman who opened doors for others, calm, radiant, and free. Her story became proof that when a woman finds her strength, no betrayal can ever define her again. Adesola's story spread far beyond Zamira City. People shared it in offices, classrooms, churches, and even online with the caption, "Never underestimate the kindness of strangers. Sometimes they hold the key to your biggest victory." Her journey touched hearts because it wasn't just about revenge. It was about rising with grace. Everyone admired how she turned pain into power without losing her softness. Young women saw her as hope, proof that you don't need to fight loud battles to win. You can win quietly with dignity. Even those who had never met her felt connected to her strength. Nkem, the neighbor who once opened her door in the middle of the night, became known as a guardian angel in disguise, and people began saying, "Be someone's Nkem when the world shuts them out." As her business grew, Adesola started speaking at women's events, sharing her story not to gain sympathy, but to inspire courage. She always said, "Sometimes the doors that close on you are just guiding you toward the ones meant for your greatness." Beo's name faded away, but Adesola's became a legend, a story mothers told their daughters and friends shared to remind each other of self-worth. Her grace became a proverb across the city. Kindness can lift a broken soul higher than pride ever could. And so, the woman once left outside in the dark became a shining light for others, proof that even betrayal can bloom into destiny when handled with patience and strength.